let's go ahead and put in a call straight from the source. All right. And today we're going to be in the book of Hebrews, chapter 4. And we're going to go down to verse 15. And the verse reads, "For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but one who has been tempted in all things, just as we are, yet without sin. Therefore, let us approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace for help at the time of our need." One more time. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things, just as we are, yet without sin. Therefore, let's approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace for help at the present time of our need. What is that text saying? What is that text talking about? So one of the things that this text is really highlighting and really breaking down is, get this, like when it comes to sympathy, because so often in different religions there is a great separation between the deity, right, the God, the person that's represented, who we worship, who we seek, who we look up to. There's always so much separation. And even for us, between God and man, there was great separation, right? So therefore, God created Jesus. And through Jesus, this is where sympathy, this is where we can clearly see sympathy. Here's why. Because Jesus came down on earth. So he's not somebody who is a high priest who is unable to understand the human struggle, but he can actually sympathize with them. Why? Because while he was on earth, he faced betrayal. Have you ever experienced that? While he was on earth, he faced loneliness. Have you ever experienced that? While he was on earth, he experienced pain, right? Pain, loneliness, betrayal. He even experienced God turning his back on him just for a brief minute because of sin, right? So therefore, when it comes to the human elements of Jesus and him being able to sympathize with us, being able to sympathize with heartbreak, being able to sympathize with pain, being able to sympathize with struggle, he's been there. So therefore, when the text says we serve a high priest who can sympathize with our pain, is that true? Is that accurate? Yeah, it is. And then somebody say, well, how do you know that your God can sympathize? Because Jesus came down on earth. And then while he was down on earth, he was beaten. He was bruised. He was battered for our transgression. He was hung on a cross for our sins, right? So he experienced these human elements of hurt, of pain, of struggle, of suffering, all of these things. And then it even talks about the temptation part, because Jesus was tempted. The text says he was tempted in every way. So now we don't even have excuse, right? Because he was tempted in every way. And this even allowed him to further demonstrate his experience with our weakness, right? So if he was tempted in every way, we now can cry out to God the Father, and we can even call on Jesus because he's been where we are, right? Despite facing the temptation, Jesus never gave in to that sin, which further talks about his perfect nature, which allowed him to give his body up as a sacrifice for us. Because back in the day, if there was a transgression or if there was a sin, the only way for that to be, the word is propitiation, but that's always seems like such a complicated word for me, propitiation. But back in the day, if people would sin, then they would go and they would make burnt offerings, and then those burnt offerings would be as a exchange for the sin, and then for individuals to get forgiveness. That burnt offering could be like a lamb. That burnt offering could be like, cattle and different things like this. that would be sacrificed up. However, Jesus was the one who was sacrificed up. And why? Because he was perfect and without sin. But the benefit is this, y'all. This text, it encourages us to approach God's throne of grace with confidence, knowing that Jesus, our high priest, understands our needs, understands our struggle, understands our hurts, understands the hangups. And then verse 16 says, therefore, let's approach the throne of grace with confidence. With confidence. You approach things with confidence when what? When you know that it's in your benefit. You approach things with confidence when what? You approach things with confidence when you know that you have the ability and the opportunity to what? Win. Back in the day, I would always ask my mom for candy while we were at the grocery store. Sometimes I would ask more confident than others. If I performed well in class, right? If I was on good behavior, if I got all smiley faces, if I got an A on my spelling test, Mom, can I have this candy? Cheese, confidently I'd ask. But the times that I wasn't confident were the times that I did not perform well, and therefore I would not ask. Family, Jesus is our A on the test. Jesus is the reason why we can be confident. Because of him, he allowed us to be cleaned up. He allowed us to operate with our best foot forward. So approach the throne of grace confidently and boldly today, family. Y'all, Jesus is not is not a deity that we can't call out to and we can't communicate with and we can't pray to, right? He hears our struggle. He hears our pain and he sympathizes with our pain. So whatever you're facing with today, whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're going through, just know and understand that he was tempted just as you were, but he did not sin. So therefore, let's lean in today, family, and approach the throne of grace boldly and confidently. All right. So that we can achieve all that God has for us. Family, we're about to take a quick commercial break. More Speaker Success in the Morning right after this.